I'm Harry Barnes, Jr., and my father was Harry Sr. And he grew up on Big Bear Creek, and it was a place that I returned to with him and my mother and my siblings many times. And my heart and soul are rooted in the mountains and in Big Bear Creek. And my grandfather was, his real name was Norman Barnes. My grandmother, Ida Barnes, who grew up in a coal mining town outside of Frostburg, was a very feisty woman, and she did not like his name. She called him Jim. So my grandfather, for all intent and purposes, was Jim Barnes, and Graham was Ida Barnes. When I was about 7 years old, 1949 or thereabouts, there's a memorable time when my father and mother were with me. I think my brother was not even born yet, so I was an only child. And so we were what my parents called, we were up the mountains, because we lived outside of Baltimore City in Baltimore County, which was very rural at the time. And so on this, maybe a weekend visit with my grandparents, although it probably was longer, because actually I got to go up with my grandfather logging in the mountains up along Little Bear Creek, and a rare occasion, and for a 7-year-old, a mystical occasion, which is deeply embedded in me. And so we got up one morning, sometime probably in June. It was a warm day, and my father said, "How would you like to go up and go with Granddad on his way to work?" And I, what's a little 7-year-old boy going to say? I'm ready anytime you're ready. So we actually went down with Granddad to the barn. He kept his team of workhorses down at the barn. He had a pair of Percherons. He had a black Percheron, and these horses were huge. These horses, my father was not tall. He was about 5'10", but his head was up at the withers on these horses, and their heads were like mountains. And so the one black Percheron was named Jack, and the gray one, it was kind of a mottled gray, beautiful monster of a horse, was named Bill. So Jack and Bill had to be put in harness, and we had to walk them up the Friendsville accident road from their house, which was at the bridge over Big Bear Creek. And excuse me, we walked probably half a mile up to the steel bridge over Little Bear Creek. And after that, there's a logging road that follows the creek up to the logging camp. And so we went up with them, and at that point, Granddad needed to tie up with the other loggers and head on up the mountains. And we couldn't really go with him because he was doing serious business at that point. He put all the harnessing on the horse, all the single trees and the hanes and the collars, and I don't remember all the equipment, but I couldn't imagine these horses carrying all this equipment. And then there were the axes and the sledges and this crosscut saw, which was 10 feet long. It was unbelievable. And old Jack and Bill had these huge canvas saddlebags, and they had all this equipment, and Granddad said, "Y'all come on back here at the end of the day, and you can, I'll let you ride Jack back to the house." And with that, he took off for the day, and Dad and I went on back to the house. So all day long I'm thinking, man, I can't wait to go up there and, see what's going on and ride that monster horse. Well, I don't know about riding that monster horse, but sounds okay. I'm sure it'll be okay. Granddad wouldn't do anything dangerous. And so finally, it was the end of the day. It was probably 4:30 or so, and we headed on up. And got warm during the day, so I was wearing shorts. I remember that. And got up across the bridge, and we went up a little bit further beyond the barn where all the equipment was. And the amazing thing was everybody was coming down off the mountain. Granddad with his horses and the other loggers, and there weren't many chainsaws back then. It was all crosscut and buck saws and very few chainsaws. And if there were chainsaws, they were about the size of a Volkswagen at that point, and kind of ridiculous compared to what there is today. So we got up there to the old barn, and we went up a little bit further, and all the loggers were coming down, and there was a truck there, and they were loading logs onto the truck. And I can remember the smell of all that fresh cut timber. And there were cherries, that sweet smell of cherries, bitter smell, I forget what that, I don't know, I remember the smell of the oaks. I love the smell of the oaks, but anyhow, every one of those logs had a different smell. And then finally a truck was loaded up and went roaring off down the road. Everybody put their tools in the barn, and people started leaving, and Granddad would come down with his horse, and he was kind of all dusty and dirty looking, had his cap kind of on crooked, and looked kind of tired, but he always had this gleam in his eye. He was always like, there's a little devil inside of him or something, but he looked cheerful, and big smile, happy to see us. And came on down and unharnessed the horse. And during the week, he left the horse up in this barn at the logging camp. And the reason we had the horse down by the house was it was a Monday, and he was taking it up for the first time for the week. So he said, well, I'll tell you what. I said, we're going to take Jack back to the house today. We're going to leave Bill up here, and I'll let you ride him back. And so I figured, that's a good deal. It's a long walk. It must have been 2 miles up to the logging camp, and I was only about so high. And so Granddad picked me up with his hands were sort of like leather, I mean, his hands were like wood. He picked me up with these powerful hands, set me on this horse. It was like being set on a mountain, and I'm sitting up there thinking, man. So he says, hang on to the mane, and my dad was there, and this is 1947. Dad's only back 2 years from World War II. He was a frontline combat medic, and he was sort of, I think going back home was part of this healing process. Anyhow, he was kind of quiet in those days, as I recall, and not overly friendly, actually, but anyhow, he and Granddad are kind of talking, man talk, and kind of mumbling, and I'm kind of in a cloud or something. I'm sitting on this horse, I'm hanging on to the mane, and we're plodding along, and I'm almost like in a trance, as I recall, and kind of listen to these guys, like, no idea what they're saying, and I can smell the tobacco smoke from them smoking, and can kind of smell the horse, and felt this mountain underneath of me bouncing along. And what I remember most is at one point, Jack took off running down through the Mount Laurels under the hemlock trees, and I was screaming, and I say, oh my God, I'm going to be, and they're trying to kill me. And my grandfather says, hang on, he's just going down the spring for a drink. And sure enough, he went down and put his head down, and I thought I was going to slide right down in the spring, but I just leaned back and held on to the mane. And he got a big drink of water down at the spring, and then he just took his time. You got to remember, this horse was at the size of a mountain. And he just plodded his great big feet on up through the Mount Laurel, come back on the road like nothing happened. Paid me no mind whatsoever. And he got in behind my dad and my granddad and didn't need any encouragement. He knew he was going for a meal, you know, and so we went on down the road, us three loggers.